California, with the City of Angels, and many other great cities. California wrestling history back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, and many other decades. But now we're in the 2000s. Oh, California. I'm John Rentham with my real honest thoughts on WWE's California Pay-Per-View History Part 2. Yeah, that was a terrible intro. Forgive me, I'm having fun. If you saw part 1, you know where we are. We're in the jungle, baby, and we're not gonna die because we've got more wrestling to cover. From WrestleMania 2 all the way until WrestleMania 39, it is gonna be a tour de force of wrestling history. Okay, I'm just gonna talk about certain matches and a little bit of detail about these events, but that's basically talking about the event, the venue, the crowd, the buy rate, the reception, and the matches that stuck out, for better or worse. So that means that part 2 starts now. So we left off at WrestleMania 2000, or we finished that up. Let's go all the way to May 2001. Judgment Day 2001. At the Arco Arena in Sacramento, California, 13,623 fans, 405,000 pay-per-view buys. And this was on the heels of WWE, or WWF at the time, by the way. Again, must plug this t-shirt. My sister buying the shirt, painting the logo because my sister is a great artist. So, that being said, Judgment Day 2001, coming off the heels of everything that happened with WCW being bought for pennies on the goddamn dollar. It's astonishing how little money Vince McMahon paid for that. And ECW also was completely bankrupt. They were done. And that being said, Judgment Day 2001, incorporating other wrestling, talents into their particular fold. Others would go to the independents. There'd be World Wrestling All-Stars a little bit later in the year. Boy, if you want to hear what I thought of that particular fiasco of a string of events, check out my reviews of the WWA pay-per-views. That being said, Judgment Day 2001 actually mostly was a pretty good show. I'm not going to say it was fantastic. There were issues, but this is when their pay-per-views still kind of felt like must-see events. We did have Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit for Kurt Angle's Olympic gold medal, and it was a pinfall match, and then it was a submission match, and then it was a ladder match. And the one thing is when Benoit is going to climb for something that's hanging up there, he's going to stick his neck out. Also, 2 out of 3 falls matches kind of became his specialty. Too bad the referee wasn't there to signal for the bell with the last one that he had. Now that the jokes are out of the way, this was actually pretty good. It wasn't like the ultimate submission match, which, again, is exactly something that Benoit knows all about. Enough jokes. Enough jokes. Kurt and Chris did always work well together. They would have a series of great matches in 2001. They would have, a great one at Royal Rumble 2003. Really, you could argue that Benoit might have been Kurt's best pure in-ring rival. At least as far as the hard hits and everything. He's one of them. But pretty good stuff. We had Kane versus Triple H. This involved, I believe, the Intercontinental Championship, and it was a chain match. This is when they were trying to build up the Brothers of Destruction to compete against the two-man power trip Triple H and Steve Austin, who stupidly turned heel, very stupidly turned heel, and also Jericho and Benoit winning Tag Team Turmoil and then getting a shot at the Tag Team Championships. Don't worry, Triple H was perfectly fine during that match. Didn't tear his quad at all. But that actually was a great moment. I think that was either the Raw after this one, or a couple Raws after this. It was still in May. So that was pretty good. And then we got Austin versus Taker in a No Holds Barred match for the WWF Championship. And I do recall that one having, a few too many shenanigans and stuff like that, because they had to protect Taker, and also Austin was physically shot to shit. You take a look at how Austin was working by the end of 2001. It's and I know neck issues, that kind of stuff, it's kind of a goddamn miracle that he was able to wrestle as long as he did. But that means that despite, some of the undercard being a little bit weird, those were top matches and actually pretty well done. It built some nice stories, especially for Benoit and Jericho to take the tag titles. So we go to SummerSlam 2001. So they didn't stay out of California very long because that's only a few months later. They were at the Combat Center in San Jose. 15,293 fans. 565,000 pay-per-view buys. Yeah, pretty goddamn good there. This was when the invasion angle was in full swing. And yes, of course, there is DDP and Canyon against the Brothers of Destruction in a cage match. Why did they hate DDP? I will just never understand that. But that arguably is probably a top 5 SummerSlam, even with some of the issues. But you had Edge versus Lance Storm for the Intercontinental Championship, a good pure wrestling match, 2 Canadians. You had RVD and Jeff Hardy in a ladder match, I believe, for the hardcore title. You had Kurt versus Steve Austin in a WWE Championship match, which had a few too many ref bumps and a few too many shenanigans. But as far as brawling and in-ring action, pretty goddamn good overall. I actually do remember liking that, even if it had a bit of a goofy finish. And Rock versus Booker in a WCW World title match. And I believe this is the one where Shane McMahon got bequeathed by a clothesline from hell. That really looked deadly. I mean, he took that like a goddamn champ, but he's lucky he didn't break his neck. And there were, I mean, really up and down the card, yes, there were some cool down matches, but realistically, it was one of the better goddamn SummerSlams, and it was pretty revered, even with the invasion angle. And I rewatched the whole thing. I rewatched it from King of the Ring 2001 till the Supermarket Brawl episode of SmackDown. And that's kind of where the whole thing ended, even though the invasion technically ended at Survivor Series 2001. I decided to watch a little bit of Ric Flair being a 50-50 owner of WWF for story. God forbid if Ric Flair ever owned a wrestling company. This, pretty good stuff. But then we stay in 2001. Apparently California was really good to them or gave them some tax breaks. Because we go to Vengeance 2001. We have 11,800 fans. We are in the San Diego Sports Arena, and we are down to 307,000 pay-per-view buys. Ouch. To be fair, December, this is not Starrcade. This is not, this is not the heyday of pay-per-view when people were going to stay home around the holidays, even though I think this was December 9th, 2001 or thereabouts. But there was only one game in town. We did have Taker versus RVD for the hardcore title, which actually was a pretty underappreciated match. We had Austin versus Kurt. That was for the, I believe, the WWF Championship. We had Jericho versus Rock for the World Championship. And then Jericho versus Austin, where Booker T would interfere and would end up costing Austin the match. And Jericho would become the first ever undisputed champion, at least in WWF. I mean, kinda. I mean, sorta. Whatever. Revisionist history is something that WWF celebrates and often will, just whitewash and do whatever they do. But also, I believe Matt and Jeff took on each other, and Lita was the referee. And there were some other matches. Vengeance 2001 wasn't necessarily the best, but it was nice. They had the mini tournament, and they had the nice building. Again, Taker versus RVD, pretty good stuff. So then they gave them a little bit of a break. They didn't come back for about 9 goddamn months. Unforgiven 2002, 16,000 fans in the Staples Center, 300,000 pay-per-view buys. And really, this was during the brand split where Raw and SmackDown were trying to establish brand white supremacy. I think that's how that phrase goes. And this is when they were still doing the co-branded pay-per-views. And I think it was, I want to say it was Backlash 2003. There was like a Raw one, and then they would trade off and stuff like that. And yeah, not exactly great. Not exactly great. Triple H versus RVD for the world title, where Triple H was just gifted the world championship, but he worked hard to get it. And RVD didn't win the world title, and RVD should have been a world champion. RVD was a world champion, and then screwed that up. I'm not saying the weed should have been the reason why he wasn't seen as a reliable champion, but I don't know why this is necessarily surprising. That being said, this was years before that. And Triple H and RVD, look, I mean, Triple H was never going to allow RVD to look really great next to him. So that's the thing about Triple H. He could make somebody look good, or he could straight up bury somebody. And RVD, yeah, he was working with Kane. They were tag team, they were tag team champions. They were, associates and stuff like that. In all honesty, Triple H always was just going to be somebody to hold someone down. And then Benoit versus Kurt Angle in an unheralded entry in their long-running feud, on again, off again feud. We had Jericho versus Flair for the IC title. This is 3 years before Flair would actually win the IC title at the same event. And then Brock versus Taker, that had the non-finish and stuff like that. And I remember Unforgiven 2002 being okay. I believe they had 3-minute warning against Billy and Chuck. I think they did. I think it was at this pay-per-view. But, and of course, I still remember, Bischoff being the old man and doing the wedding thing. And that was great. That is great shit. I still get goosebumps thinking about it because it's one of my favorite SmackDown moments ever. But Unforgiven 2002 was kind of a middle-of-the-road pay-per-view. It had some decent moments, but Taker and Brock, they didn't want to beat Brock, but they didn't want to beat Taker, so yeah. Then they actually gave him about a year, almost a year and a half break, actually. We go No Way Out 2004. 11,000 fans in the historic Cow Palace. 350,000 pay-per-view buys. Take that, Triple H. A SmackDown pay-per-view beat your ass. We got Chavo versus Ray, Cruiserweight Championship involved. Angle versus Big Show versus John Cena to determine who would face the WWE Champion at WrestleMania. And the WWE Championship was on the line when the Beast de Bork Laser took on Eddie Guerrero. Eddie's family was in the front row, at least the family members that were still alive, including his mother. And Eddie and Brock had a quick build, and Eddie did a tremendous promo talking about his addictions, that kind of stuff, overcoming that. And, I mean, I guess really the only asterisk with this is they had to find a way to get Bill Goldberg involved, and Bill Goldberg did end up showing up and attacking Brock Lesnar because he got taken out at the Rumble. And the one thing you will not do is anger Bill Goldberg without Bill Goldberg coming back and attacking you. And thank you, Bret Hart, for calling him Bill Goldberg so much, and now I must call him Bill Goldberg. But that being said, yeah, the stuff in hindsight, Brock telling Eddie, just die, Eddie. And unfortunately, Eddie would be dead less than 2 years after this event. He wasn't wishing death on him. He was just like, just stay down, that kind of stuff. But Eddie and Brock sent the crowd home happy because Eddie winning the championship was a big deal. And it was a big buy rate. That was a pretty damn big buy rate. And pretty fucking solid as far as a main event. Now, the undercard was okay. And Eddie unfortunately blamed himself for the shows not drawing as well, which I think is unfair. But don't worry, because the event that they had next would definitely send the crowd home a lot. It's Judgment Day 2004. Literally 3 months away. Again, California must be really good for them. 18,722 fans in the Staples Center. 235,000 pay-per-view buys. For this shit. For this goddamn SmackDown event with pyro. I mean, really. That's what this fucking was. You had Kevin Thorne, or, yeah, you had Mordecai. Hear Me, Fear Me, and remember when God, I remember thinking Mordecai might actually be a good gimmick. I was like 23 at the time. It wasn't. His pay-per-view debut wasn't good. I think he had 2 pay-per-view matches. They wanted to have him against The Undertaker at SummerSlam. Good Lord. Cena versus Rene Dupree for the U.S. title. That shows the state of this goddamn championship. And nothing against Rene Dupree. It's just they tried with him. Yes, he was still young, but they tried with him, and it never worked. Taker versus Booker, because Brock left, and Brock didn't want to job out, and Brock ended up leaving at Mania 20. And so Booker got sacrificed. And then Eddie against JBL, where Eddie almost bled out. Hit the gusher, and my God, that was disturbing. That was really disturbing. I'm glad that Eddie was okay, at least on that night. Rest in peace, Eddie. God, I miss Eddie. Miss Eddie so much. But that was not a very good event. Like, the people didn't like the non-finish, but they liked the Eddie fired up. But man, he bladed way too deep. And he was trying to keep all the blood in his head, but he was unsuccessful. That's the lesser version of the Sum 41 song. So now we go to one of the pivotal moments and events, that is, in WWE pay-per-view California history in awful English. WrestleMania 21, hooray! WrestleMania 21, WrestleMania Chodes Hollywood. I think that was the tagline. So, they were once again in the Staples Center, 20,193 fans, 1.09 million pay-per-view buys, and everybody came to see Trish versus Christy Hemme. Poor Christy Hemme. God bless Christy Hemme. She tried, but Lita blew her knee out. Good job, Lita. You Dumas. Anyway, Kurt versus Shawn. Tremendous fucking match. One of my favorite WrestleMania matches ever. If I were to come up with a playlist of WrestleMania matches I watch every single year, that would be one. It's back when, Kurt, even with his health issues, was at a peak. He could do so much great shit. Shawn was still able to go. This was on his second half of his career resurgence. And bless Shawn. I mean, he had his eye on the referee and he had his eye on Kurt at the same time. But a tremendous match. Yeah, you could argue maybe the Vengeance Day 2005 one was almost as good. And they had another one. I think it was a 30-minute Iron Man match on the Raw return on USA, October 3rd, 2005. That maybe was just as good as this one, but I still like this one. Just, goddamn, they just freaking went nuts. They paced it well, great spots. And then you have Money in the Bank 1, Chris Benoit losing when Edge knocked him off the goddamn ladder and won. And Chris Benoit had that look on his face and was shaking and then, started gripping the extension cord. I said I was done, but I just can't help it. So, yeah, you had others involved as well. Shelton showing off because that's just how great Shelton was. And Money in the Bank 2001 was, kicked things off. And it was a WrestleMania staple until 26, and then we got a Money in the Bank pay-per-view, and then I argued they should put Money in the Bank back at WrestleMania and just have another pay-per-view, like bring back No Way Out or something. Bring back something like one of the older ones. Bring back Vengeance, because I don't think you need to have Money in the Bank be its own pay-per-view. Or, if you're going to have Money in the Bank as a pay-per-view, have the men be at Mania, have the women be at Money in the Bank. Or switch it around. Have the women be at Mania. Have the men be at Money in the Bank. Switch it around. That being said, Cena versus JBL, WWE Championship. And Cena won, celebrated in the crowd. Batista and Triple H. The Animal. Apparently, Batista did not have any feeling in one of his legs, or very little feeling, and was able to do that. So that was pretty goddamn good that he was able to somehow do that. So now that we're just going to put that over there, we are going all the way to WrestleMania 21. As far as reception, many would say that's one of the better, if not one of the best WrestleManias. Definitely one of the better. Taboo Tuesday. Come Tuesday. I'm sorry. Anyway, Taboo Tuesday 2005. 6,000 fans at the iPay1 Center in San Diego, California. 174,000 pay-per-view buys. Not very good. Not Taboo Tuesday, Cyber Sunday. I guess they were interesting concepts, except they would always skew the fans to vote a certain way. This is when Austin no-showed because he didn't want a job to coach. And coach, I believe, had Vader and Goldust with him, and Batista stepped in and did that, despite the fact that Batista was the world champion, and that's the best they could have. Yeah, that was certainly a choice. That would have been Austin's comeback match. That would have been Austin's comeback match against Jonathan Coachman. That pile of shit. Flair versus Triple H in a steel cage match. Flair was the Intercontinental Champion, and did he defend the Intercontinental title successfully on pay-per-view? Wait, I think this might have been an Intercontinental Championship match. So I just answered my own question there, because he didn't defend the title all that much. He was just given the title for like 5 months. He lost in February to Shelton. It was Survivor Series where they had the no holds barred match, or street fight, or whatever it was, and Flair bled like crazy and was then written off TV until the Rumble, and then got eliminated very quickly. But pretty good cage match from what I recall. Cena versus Angle versus Shawn. That was pretty well done. Edge was looking to cash in Money in the Bank. And then Foley came back for a match against Carlito, and Mankind was the persona they voted for, and yeah. Whew, yeah, Taboo Tuesday wasn't very good. I mean, like, Flair and Triple H and Cena Angle and Shawn were actually pretty good, but realistically, like, it was not enough to sink your teeth into. Also, Taboo Tuesday was the last pay-per-view that Christian was part of until he came back in 2009. He went on a sabbatical for 3 years, according to WWE. Actually, he was in TNA, killing it for a while, and then getting killed off because he didn't want to re-sign because Dixie's an idiot. So then they gave him, just over a year break. We go to No Way Out 2007, 14,000 fans in the Staples Center, and 218,000 pay-per-view buys. And there wasn't much to write home about with this show. A lot of it was kind of a standard SmackDown or Raw. Benoit and the Hardys took on MVP and Eminem. So there you are. That was building up Benoit and MVP, U.S. title feud, and the Hardys and Eminem after the unfortunate accident that destroyed, I almost said Freddie Mercury, destroyed Freddie Mercury's nose. He's just got to get his nose out of here. Joey Mercury is what I'm trying to say. And that was certainly a choice that they had him wrestle with a goddamn mask. I mean, credit to him. He wanted to do that shit, but didn't want to take time off. But then we got Taker and Batista against Cena and Shawn in a main event. It was SmackDown World Title main event, Raw WWE Title main event, and then Cena and Shawn would end up winning the Tag Team Championships. Or maybe they had already won the Tag Team Championships. Because I know they lost them the Raw after WrestleMania 23 in like some kind of Battle Royal. But not exactly a great event. I mean, I remember looking at the card and thinking, oh boy. I think it was Boogie and Little Boogie, Boogeyman and Little Boogeyman against Finlay and Hornswoggle. If not here, it was around this time. And Great American Bash 2007. So, okay, they gave him a bit of a break there. 13,034 fans. The HP Pavilion in San Jose. And this thing could have used more HP. 229,000 pay-per-view buys. Pay-per-view buys, for the B-level pay-per-views were starting to falter. Umaga versus Jeff Hardy, or Umanga, as Regal called him. Why did he call him Umanga? I have no idea. It's for the IC title. Decent enough. This is... Umaga and Jeff Hardy had a good series of matches. It just involved Jeff falling off the shit and Umaga... them trying to preserve his cloak of invincibility despite the fact that I've been shattered. And Cena versus Lashley for the WWE Championship. Lashley's last high-profile match because unfortunately he would suffer a shoulder injury. He'd be written off of television. He'd be released from the company in like early 2008. He'd show up in TNA for a bit. He'd do the MMA. He'd do his stuff and everything. And then he came back after getting rid of that little Nat Leo Rush, that piece of shit. He was able to do some great things. I was able to become a WWE champion. Now, is hurting people in AEW. But that being said, Great American Bash 2007, fresh off the heels of what Benoit did. Because Vengeance 2007 was obviously during the timeline. Great American Bash 2007, like WWE really had to build themselves back up as far as getting, like fan interest back. And it was like all of wrestling, to be perfectly honest. But WWE, especially with how they handled it. Now, California had a little bit of a break. Because the next one, it wasn't until June of the following year, One Night Stand 2008. Just under 10,000 fans in the San Diego Sports Arena and 194,000 pay-per-view buys. So yeah, things are really going downhill. Batista versus Shawn Michaels in a stretcher match. Stretcher, I barely know her. I don't love you and I'm not sorry. You were supposed to be my friend. Wait, that's something else. That was Survivor Series. Was that Survivor Series? No, that was Bragging Rights. I think it was Bragging Rights. And they beat the shit. It's like, I'm gonna take your head off. Just Batista beat that heel. That was great. God, that was great. This was after that. Or before that, I mean. Shawn was taken out for a bit. I think Batista and Shawn had a pretty good feud, considering Shawn had retired Ric Flair. Ric Flair never wrestled again. Why dare you say that? And how dare you say that? Not better English. Cena versus JBL in a first blood match. And Edge versus Taker in a TLC match for the world title. And because Taker lost, he had to retire. He would never come back again. Except he totally fucking did. So I'm going to finish up with these next four, and then we'll finish up with a few of these. We'll get to a certain stopping point. But the Bash 2009, so they gave them a long break. I think that was 11 months, 13 months. Good Lord. Just under 12,000 fans in the Arco Arena in Sacramento, California. 178,000 pay-per-view buys. Ouch. Ouch. So Jeff Hardy and CM Punk in a world title match that ended in a DQ, but they had a pretty good feud. And CM Punk was right about Jeff Hardy. Absolutely right about Jeff. Constant screw up. Look, he seems to be happier now. He shouldn't be wrestling because he can barely move. Ray versus Jericho in a IC title versus mask match. That's right. If Jericho lost, he'd have to remove whatever that leather is on his face. Oh, wait, I meant Ray. And they had a pretty underappreciated feud, honestly. I would say the June pay-per-view was One Night Stand. No, wasn't One Night Stand. It was Extreme Rules. And they had, a nice little finish where Ray's mask was obviously just unclasped enough where 619 ripped the mask off. Ray covers his face. 1, 2, 3. Good finish there. But Ray and Jericho having a nice title versus mask match there. Orton versus Triple H, 3 stages of Heffel. This is really when they were trying with Orton. And bless Orton because Batista was out. Orton had actually lost to Batista, but then Batista, I believe, got injured in the cage match or was injured going into the cage. And instead of just having Batista lose there, they had Orton lose, and then they had a 4-way where I think was it was Triple H, Cena, Big Show, and Orton. I think it was. And Big Show got pinned with the RKO, but 3 stages of hell. Like, this wasn't too bad, but it wasn't great. The Bash is kind of seen as not a low point, but it was one of those lower on the ladder pay-per-views. And then they really didn't stay out of California for long because they were back there for SummerSlam 2009, one of a string of SummerSlams that would be taking place in LA, the Staples Center specifically. 14,116 fans. And again, the Staples Center, 369,000 pay-per-view buys. Pretty good SummerSlam. Actually, 2009 was a bit of a banner year at points for WWE. Ray versus Ziggler in an IC title match. Ray then took time off for not a suspension, and Johnny Nitro beat him. Or John Morrison. I think it was John Morrison by this point. He would have been John Morrison by this point because he was part of M&M in 2006. But yeah, Ziggler couldn't win, but Morrison could. DX versus Legacy. This was continuing, basically sparking off their feud. They had been having some skirmishes and stuff like that on TV. And then we would get to Breaking Point, and then we would do the Hell in a Cell match where Legacy got destroyed. You can paint it any way you want, but they got destroyed. That one was all right. Orton versus Cena for the WWE title. If Orton got disqualified again, he would lose the championship, and this would then lead to Breaking Point, I Quit, where Orton was being sadomasochistic towards Cena and beating him with a stick. Just sticking him. High stick. And Punk versus Jeff Hardy in a TLC match for the world title where Jeff nearly died, and then Jeff lost a cage match on the following SmackDown and then left and then got arrested again for being an idiot. I'll let it go one of these days when Jeff stops being an idiot. That being said, SummerSlam 2009, pretty goddamn good overall. And then we go to the following August, SummerSlam 2010. 17,463 fans. Staples Center, 350,000 pay-per-view buys. So a little bit lower. And I bet some people wish they hadn't bought this pay-per-view by the end of the main event. Ray versus Kane with The Undertaker's return. I would argue this was a fairly lame SummerSlam because of the finish of the main event, which was Team WWE, which is Cena, the returning Daniel Bryan, Edge, Jericho, Truth, Brett. It was supposed to be Ricky Steamboat, but he had a brain aneurysm. Shit. Forgot who else. Team Nexus was just the Nexus. And had the Nexus won, this might have been better received. I'm not saying the Nexus would have gone on to be dominant like the NWO. I'm not saying that it would have been the catalyst to launch all their careers. But you can't tell me that this didn't kill the group dead, and this didn't basically nullify any chance of them ever having any anger, heat, or believability with the audience. Wade Barrett may have never been a WWE champion, but he would have had a better chance of being taken seriously, because after that, even when he won the Intercontinental title a number of times, he was still seen as a loser. And Team Nexus losing after Cena took a DDT on the outside on the exposed concrete that should have shattered his brain, and then he rose above hate and eliminated the last two. I think it was Justin Gabriel and Wade Barrett. I know he eliminated Wade Barrett last, but oh boy. Oh boy. Now we go to Elimination Chamber 2011. So we just go a number of months ahead. 11,500 fans. Oracle Arena in Oakland, California. Was that the old Oakland Arena that Super Brawl 9 took place in? Let me know in the comments. Forgot to write that down. 212,000 pay-per-view buys. So, to be fair, better than Bash 09 and better than One Night Stand 08, but starting to go downhill. Edge, Ray, Kane, Drew, Show, and, various others in the Barrett World title match. And Cena, Punk, Morrison, Sheamus, Orton, and Truth to earn a shot against the WWE champion, because that was The Miz. The Miz ended up beating Jerry Lawler because they did that on-again, off-again feud. And then we had heel Michael Cole, which I hated. And everybody should have hated, because it involved Michael Cole doing stuff that he didn't deserve to do, because he's a bad commentator and an even worse performer. But he doesn't have Vince McMahon screaming in his ear, so he's fine. No, he's not. He's not fucking fine. But that being said, that one wasn't that well received. Like, the Elimination Chamber matches were the selling point. Pay-per-view buy rates are starting to really go down. So that being said, that's really all I'm going to say right there. Part 3 is going to be coming up in a little bit. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Riplin, and I'll see you soon.